Welcome to another edition of The Hunt. My name is George Parkhurst. I'm an executive recruiter with Advice Personnel, which is a full service recruitment agency based in New York City. And I have a special episode for the public accountants out there. I was formerly a public accountant at Ernst & Young, and even our co-directors and co-founders were prior public accountants. So this is kind of a specialty of our firm, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about kind of what public accountants need to be thinking and doing right now, which is tough given the the circumstance, right? It's a really busy time of the year. March is coming on Monday, and a lot of stuff going on in public accounting, right? There's financial statement preparation. There are 315 deadlines, 415 deadlines, and everybody's quite busy right now. So for those who maybe were thinking about, hey, I want to make a move, but not until after busy season. I want to start getting public accountants to start thinking and even give reasons why they should start interviewing right now, to ensure that when they do make that choice, it's going to be the right one. And I'll also share, some personal anecdotes from my time in public accounting, a particular mistake I made, in thinking about new roles, as well as some things I've learned from recruiting public accountants for just the last year or so. I want to get started with the thinking part, right? Starting to think, I'm so busy, I can't put my mind to anything but the work I'm doing right now. And I'm going to try to persuade you as to why it might be a good idea to start thinking. I think number one, to give yourself a baseline of what you like to do and where you see yourself in the next couple of years or in the next role. It's critical to develop some sort of baseline for what do I like, where do I see myself going, and what type of environment do I want to be living in. And I think it's great being in public accounting because you get this concrete understanding of, do I like this, do I not like this? Maybe it's a hybrid of the two. There are certain people who like some parts of it, but not others. So a couple things to start thinking about is number one, do I like the day-to-day work that I'm doing? Is it something that I can see myself doing on the other side? When I look at my clients, are they, when I see them doing internal accounting, is that something that I can see myself doing? And from many public accountants I speak to, maybe they like certain parts of the role. And obviously you get the client-facing aspect of it. You get to do certain analytical procedures and certain new challenges that come up that are, atypical. But I hear from a lot of public accountants, they want to get into other things, like getting into FP&A, wanting to be in more of a forward-driven role, or being more on like the operations side. They get really excited by being able to help really drive a business from an ops perspective. And that's something you want to do. So it's critical that if you are thinking about wanting to do something a little bit different, that you start now and start identifying what are ways to get there. Are there opportunities for, being able to leverage, what I've done now to be able to to bring in some of those strengths and then be able to learn the things you want to learn. I think that could be really critical. I also think having more of a long-term perspective is great. And I'll get into my kind of, mistakes when I was coming out of public, but thinking about it long-term is a hard thing to do when you're in your 20s, right? It's, you're thinking about just getting through the day, right? And trying to get through the busy season. But, if you can identify, maybe leaders that you've spoken to or, potential roles, for example, like a CFO role path or a, controller path, or maybe more on the strategy side, wanting to do something different. Starting to think about that right now is going to be critical to getting your foot in the door with those certain places, being able to do the due diligence to say, I'm at point A here, how do I get to point B? So I think that's a really critical way to get started, is to start thinking, do I like what I'm doing now? And where do I see myself long-term? Another thing that I've learned in recruiting is that, industry is really important to people. Being involved in, a company that has an industry that's really interesting, fast growth. I tell a lot of our, candidates, COVID really helped show, what certain industries were going to do well or are going to really live on, and then what industries kind of have been faulting as a result of what's been going on with this pandemic. And, I think for some of our clients, with e-commerce and, software clients, there's a lot of new industries out there to explore that are fast growth industries. So identifying for the clients you're working on as a public accountant, are these clients that you really enjoy working with? Do you like, value that type of business? Is that something you could see yourself doing in the long term? Because the longer you decide to specialize in an industry similar to a role, the harder it is to move into that industry you want down the road. So when you're in public accounting, just a few couple of years in, I think it's great to identify, hey, these are certain industries that maybe I don't even, know about professionally, but I have a personal interest in, and I'd like to be able to get into it that way. So I think setting a baseline for yourself as to what excites you, and looking at your current situation to identify, is this something that, I want to stay in for a long term, or are there other ways that I can kind of migrate into things I do want to do? I think that's the first start. And moving into, it's so hard to start thinking right now. It's even harder to start interviewing. So you really, when you're in the thick of things with busy season, it's like I don't have any time to interview right now. But I'd love to get a role after busy season. I come across that a lot of, I can't leave by this certain deadline. Well, to start, most of these processes last between 4 and 6 weeks. From the time that you submit your application to the time that you may be getting an offer, it's between 4 and 6 weeks. So if you factor in, the 2 weeks you would need to put in, which are pretty standard to actually take the role, we're looking at like 2 months here until they're actually placing the role. So if you're thought on, hey, I want to move, but I don't want to move until April, if that's kind of your mindset, then getting started now is going to help you land the job in April. And especially if you only get started with processes in April, it's going to be very difficult to land a job in like the short term. And obviously, the market gets even more competitive, right? I think it's a common misconception, and it's a common fear by public accountants that I just don't have time to interview. I'm sure other public accountants aren't interviewing. Well, when that April timeframe comes, everybody who wants to leave is going to be wanting to get into new opportunities. So it's going to give you a competitive advantage in some ways by, I think, having this, this information. So I think that's really important. I also think, getting a concrete understanding of, was my thinking in the first segment, validated, is interviewing is the best way to do that, right? You have your certain thoughts on what the perfect role and the perfect environment is for you, whether you're moving into a private accounting role or it's something a little bit different. You feel good about doing something different. The interview is going to help you validate, is this something I'm capable of doing? Can I be successful in this? And would I like doing this, which is, the most important part. I think that kind of spearheads success, right? Being able to like something. So, being able to get some concrete understanding of, I have experiential evidence that this is something I want to do, or, wow, I've learned that this is not something I want to do, and I got to go back to the drawing board. So I think, with starting to interview, I think you're going to get so much tangible evidence as to what's going to be the perfect fit for you. And a more modern point for this, given what we've been experiencing with COVID, is, with the state of interviewing right now, there are, you are really interviewing by Zoom rather than actually going to the office. So in terms of saving time, you kind of get that too, right? You don't have to commute halfway down. For us, it's New York, right? You don't have to, commute halfway across Manhattan to get to an opportunity, only to waste half your day during a really busy time. You have the opportunity to interview with, CFOs and leaders of accounting and finance organizations, and possible leaders of cross-functional departments, and, a lot of different people that get such a great insight into, is this a really cool place to work, and how bullish are they on this company? Those things are really critical. And personally, we work a lot in the startup space, and what's cool for our candidates is many times they get an opportunity to interview with even co-founders. So you get such a feeling from these co-founders and from the team of, why are they in it and for what reasons, and how bullish are you on the company? It goes back to industry, right? If you have a certain belief that this is a great industry to be in, you want to look at it from kind of an investor perspective. And you get this amazing opportunity to do that, to be able to ask questions about, like, where do you see long-term growth, and asking real questions that may not even impact your job, but are going to impact the state of the business long-term. So I think, people look at interviewing as something I have to do. And, personal advice we always give is just try to enjoy the interview. I know my director, Aaron, says it all the time, and it could not be more true. Enjoy the interview. You get an opportunity to speak with people that are, leaders, potential coworkers, and really get a feel for different organizations. And you should feel lucky to be able to do that. It's an amazing way to even network and build business relationships. And, there is so much more to just an interview other than, just getting a job. Obviously, that's the paramount piece, to interviewing to get the job. But the other piece is really, getting an opportunity to explore. I say I almost like people that are, really like to think about this stuff, but are not totally active. They're not looking to leave tomorrow, but they really do want to explore. I think it's such a great opportunity to take a couple different interviews and be able to compare them to each other, and then comparing them against your previous thinking, and seeing kind of where do things necessarily stack up. So I think that's really critical, and it helps you kind of like dig deeper and get a deeper understanding of the role. So I think it's not just from a can I do the job perspective, but it's also, can I enjoy this, and what is this going to bring me long term? Obviously, the average span of a person at a role now is between 2.5 and 3 years. That means that we would love to be able to place somebody from our perspective into roles that they are in forever and they absolutely love it. But statistically, that's just not how things work, right? So you want to also understand, how is this going to set me up for success in the long term, whether it's at this future opportunity, or is it going to, or is it going to set me up for maybe other opportunities and getting in the door with something else? So I think that's really critical. So those are my two little speeches on starting to think and starting to interview. I think that it brings both a kind of a tangible perspective of, hey, from a timing perspective, if you're really thinking about that April, May timeframe, it's a good time to interview to actually get jobs. But I also look at it as a more, holistic way to make sure that when that time comes, you're going to be making the right move. So I'd love to kind of chat a bit about my experience, not only as a recruiter in the last year, but also as somebody who was a public accountant. I think, and just bring it, some personal insights that might help people start conceptualizing what they want to do. So the months leading up to me leaving Ernst and Young, I was starting to think about what I wanted to do, and I was so overly focused on finding a place with an amazing work-life balance and culture and flexibility, and a place that kind of had like a different energy than maybe that I was feeling at Ernst and Young. So, I felt like I didn't do enough prep work in the beginning, so that every time that I got into interviews, I almost felt like I was wooed, and you get that kind of recency bias of, well, it's got to be better than what I'm dealing with now, because, I was generally not enjoying what I was doing. So I ended up going into a few different interviews, and was just so, appreciative of them liking me when I wasn't really doing as much of the kind of the legwork on my end to find are they a good fit for me? So, we get into this emotional feeling of like wanting to be wanted. And I say that a lot, but, interviews are not just for, figuring out if they're good for you. And I've said it many times, but it's really about you figuring out, are they going to be good for you? And I don't think I did enough legwork from that perspective. And I also didn't look at where my strengths were from a skill set perspective. Maybe it comes from, how I always used to struggle in certain classes, and I would try really hard to get up in those certain classes where with my particular strengths, I would just let them be, because I knew I could coast on those particular strengths, where, I never thought about, hey, I want to leverage my strengths and be in a position where my strengths are going to be utilized the most. And they didn't happen to be in accounting, ironically. Obviously, I'm doing this as an executive recruiter right now. So, I've obviously moved out of the accounting world. And it took a while to learn that. And I have certain, I really love what I'm doing now. And I have certain regrets, I think, around not figuring this out earlier. I had ideas about, that I like doing sales, and I had certain things that were non-professional that I kind of loved to participate in, that gave me an idea. I wanted to do that. And, everybody has their certain strengths, right? And it's almost like I can identify them, but I didn't understand how they could be used in like the best way possible. So I ended up settling on a position which and was a great experience for me. But doing something that was just not a strength of mine. And I found myself just trying to get up to base level rather than being able to take that, like the strengths, use them and be able to do something that I really enjoyed doing. So, I found that I find that I do whatever I can to try to articulate my pain points and some of my mistakes, so that public accountants in the future don't really are able to kind of get past that and make the right decisions right after when they are deciding to leave. So I think that's one point. And then another point with being a recruiter over the last year and a half and being able to speak with so many different public accountants. I also I've said this many times that I felt I was kind of jaded towards the big four. I looked at the big four as being like this cherished firm, and obviously there are so many smart people that work there and amazing things that you can get into. But because I only had experience working in the big four, I had a certain bias towards the big four. And over the last year and a half, I've been able to speak to public accountants from all different firms. The big four, they tend to have clients that are multinational, billion-dollar clients, and then some of the more regional firms, smaller firms have clients that are between 10 million and 500 million. And having those conversations with some of the more regional accountants, the more regional CPA firm accountants, I recognize that there are certain strengths that they actually bring and certain experiences they've gotten that I never was exposed to at Ernst & Young. I was so, the clients we, audit at EY are so large that you're really only taking a piece out of it. So when you're thinking about, do I want to be a specialist in something? And if you want to, maybe that is the best way to go. You get really complex clients and get to work on very specific things. But if you see yourself, wanting something a little bit broader and really wanting to be in more of a controller level position down the road, I've found that regional CPA firms can be an excellent option for those that are thinking, I want to go into private, but I'm also open to other opportunities. I think from the regional accountants I've spoken to, you get such an amazing picture of the entire GL. You really are seeing things from beginning to end, and that has its own strengths. And I think there are opportunities to really get broader exposure from that perspective. Having said that, they both have their strengths. There's no doubt about that. And I wish I had kind of had more experiential knowledge of that, before I even became a recruiter. I really didn't know what was out there. And I think it starts with going back to the first point, which is you need to start thinking about these things. And you also need to talk to your peers, and you also need to do as much research as you can. And I know it requires a level of sacrifice, right, to be able to take the time to do this. But I promise everybody that, when that time comes and you feel like you've done everything you can to find out what you want, you won't regret the time you put in. And, I truly believe that. So that's my little spiel for today. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Hunt. My name is George Parkhurst. If you are a public accountant who happens to be in a situation like this, or even just wants to find some time after hours, weekends to chat about this kind of stuff, I would be happy to. So, you can follow me on LinkedIn, and obviously follow Advice Personnel and when you get the chance, and make sure to tune in next week for next week's episode of The Hunt. So thank you so much.